I was just about to start my morning routine, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, when I saw them. A group of people, all dressed the same, marching toward my front door like they were on some kind of mission. At first I thought they were selling something or maybe even pulling a prank. But then I noticed the cheap plastic badges clipped to their shirts. One of them, a woman I immediately recognized as Karen, stood front and center, arms crossed like she was about to declare war. Karen had always been a problem. She ran the HOA like it was her own personal kingdom, making up rules on the fly and handing out fines like Halloween candy. I'd lived here long enough to know that the HOA wasn't just annoying, it was out of control. They'd fined people for having the wrong color flowers in their front yard. One guy got written up for leaving his trash cans out 2 minutes past pickup. But this was a new level of crazy. Before I could even ask what was going on, Karen spoke. "You're in serious violation of HOA regulations," she announced, holding up a clipboard like it was some kind of legal document. "And as the head of the HOA enforcement team, we are placing you under HOA arrest." I actually laughed. I thought she was joking. Then one of her goons pulled out a pair of plastic handcuffs. That's when I realized these lunatics were dead serious. It was supposed to be a normal morning. I had just poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, enjoying the quiet before the day really started. But as I stood by the window, I caught a glimpse of something weird in the reflection. There were 4 people standing on my sidewalk, all wearing matching polo shirts, cheap sunglasses, and an air of fake authority that was almost comical. Almost. Leading the pack was Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA. She had her arms crossed, chin lifted like she was about to deliver a groundbreaking speech. Behind her, 2 guys and another woman stood stiffly, like they had rehearsed this moment in front of a mirror. One of them clutched a clipboard, the other had a toy walkie-talkie strapped to his waist, and the last one, who looked way too excited about all this, was gripping something in his pocket. Before I could even open my door, Karen spoke. "You're in serious violation of HOA rules, and we are taking action." I blinked at her, still half asleep. "Excuse me?" Karen pushed forward, holding up what looked like a badge, but instead of anything official, it was a laminated piece of paper with the HOA logo and the words Community Compliance Officer typed underneath. She pointed at me like she was some kind of prosecutor. "You have multiple unresolved violations, including the unauthorized color of your garage, the improper parking of a vehicle, and..." She paused for dramatic effect. "Unneighborly behavior." I almost choked on my coffee. "Unneighborly behavior?" "You've refused to attend HOA meetings, ignored multiple citations, and have openly disrespected the authority of this association," Karen snapped, like she had been waiting for this moment. "And because you refuse to cooperate," she continued, "the HOA is exercising its right to civil custody." I frowned. "You're what?" Karen gestured to the guy who had been gripping something in his pocket. With a self-important nod, he pulled out a pair of plastic handcuffs. "We are authorized to detain non-compliant residents until the matter is resolved." I stared at them. "You can't be serious." But they were. The guy actually stepped toward me like he was about to cuff me right there on my own porch. That's when I decided I had played along long enough. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my wallet, and flipped it open to show my real badge. The genuine government-issued, fully legal badge of a town marshal. Karen's confident smirk vanished. The guy with the plastic cuffs froze. The woman with the clipboard took an actual step back. I kept my voice calm. "So, let me get this straight. You're impersonating law enforcement. You're attempting to detain a citizen without legal authority, and you're trespassing on my property." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Her goons glanced at each other, clearly rethinking their life choices. "This," I said, pointing to her fake badge, "isn't worth a thing. But mine? Mine means I could arrest you right now." The silence stretched. A bead of sweat rolled down the forehead of the guy still holding the plastic cuffs. Karen, still clinging to whatever shred of power she thought she had, straightened her shoulders. "This isn't over." She turned on her heel and stormed off, her little squad scrambling to keep up. I watched them go, shaking my head. I knew she'd be back. People like Karen never give up that easily. The next morning, something felt off. My trash cans, which I had put out the night before like always, were gone. Not knocked over, not misplaced. Completely gone. I checked the whole street, thinking maybe some teenager had pulled a prank, but nope. Every other house had their trash cans neatly lined up. Just mine had disappeared. Then came the letter. Stuck to my front door with HOA letterhead, it was full of the most ridiculous nonsense I'd ever seen. Apparently, I was now banned from using waste disposal services due to my repeated refusal to comply with community guidelines. Even better, I was being strongly encouraged to attend a series of behavior reform meetings to learn how to be a better community member. Across the street, Karen stood on her porch, sipping coffee with the smuggest grin I'd ever seen. She didn't even try to hide it. This wasn't just a petty little HOA rule enforcement. This was a declaration of war. By the afternoon, the insanity had escalated. I pulled into my driveway to find a huge sign taped across my garage door. "Closed by HOA order. Non-compliant resident." It had been made to look official, complete with a fake city seal and a bunch of legal-sounding jargon underneath. I ripped it down immediately. As soon as I did, two of Karen's minions, clipboard lady and plastic handcuffs guy, stepped out from behind a bush, furiously scribbling in little notepads like they were detectives at a crime scene. Karen appeared moments later, acting like I had just committed a serious crime. "You can't just ignore community rules," she scolded, hands on her hips. I stared at her, deadpan. "Karen, you have no authority over anything except annoying me." Her face twitched. "This is going on record." "Great," I said, and slammed my front door in her face. But Karen wasn't done. Later that evening, a neighbor knocked on my door, looking concerned. "Hey, just so you know, there are 2 squad cars outside your house." I frowned. "Seriously?" I stepped outside, and sure enough, 2 police cruisers were parked at the curb. And standing next to them, looking every bit the innocent victim, was Karen. She was putting on quite the performance, wringing her hands, shaking her head, acting like she had just escaped some kind of danger. One of the officers glanced up, immediately recognizing me. "Oh, hey, Marshal!" Karen's expression dropped like a rock. I walked up casually. "So, what's going on?" The officer sighed, looking between Karen and me. "She called us, said she was fearing for community safety, and that you were threatening her and disregarding HOA laws." I raised an eyebrow. "Threatening her?" Karen jumped in, voice all high and dramatic. "He's been aggressive. He refuses to follow our regulations. He's openly hostile to the HOA." The officer gave me a look. "Is that true?" I crossed my arms. "I think you know the answer." The other officer, clearly tired of the nonsense, turned to Karen. "Ma'am, filing a false police report is a crime. If you continue to waste police resources on personal disputes, we're going to have a real problem." Karen's face turned beet red. She opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. I watched as she struggled to keep it together, her entire plan backfiring in real time. She was used to getting her way through intimidation and fake authority. But now, she was up against people who actually knew the law. For a second, I thought she might finally give up. But then, with a huff, she spun on her heel and stomped away. I had won this round. But something told me Karen wasn't finished yet. I woke up to the sound of something loud rumbling outside, way too early for my liking. At first I thought it was a garbage truck, but as I pulled back my curtains, I saw a full-on construction crew setting up in front of my house. Trucks, cones, guys in hard hats. It looked like they were about to start a major project. Karen, of course, was standing on her porch, arms crossed, looking way too pleased with herself. I threw on some clothes and went outside. One of the workers, clipboard in hand, barely glanced up as he said, "We're here for the HOA work order. Gotta fix the underground leak." I blinked. "What underground leak?" He flipped through some papers. "Says here there's a major plumbing issue under this property. We need to dig up the front yard." Now, I'm no plumber, but I was pretty sure my yard wasn't hiding some secret underground disaster. And considering this was coming from the same HOA that had tried to arrest me with dollar store handcuffs, I wasn't about to take their word for it. I pulled out my real badge and flashed it. "This is my property. There is no leak. And you are not digging up my yard." The worker's eyes widened. He turned back to his crew and muttered something before quickly packing up his things. They clearly wanted no part in whatever this was. Karen, on the other hand, lost her mind. "You can't interfere with HOA orders," she screeched. I stared at her. "Karen, you literally just hired a construction crew to tear up my yard for no reason." Her face turned red, but she didn't have a comeback. The crew drove off, and I went back inside. But I knew this wasn't the last of it. Sure enough, the next morning, a new letter was waiting for me. It was the most ridiculous one yet. According to Karen and her HOA minions, my behavior was too disruptive for the community, and they were officially revoking my residency rights. In other words, they were trying to evict me. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the letter. The HOA didn't own my house. They had no legal authority to kick me out, but that didn't stop them from trying to make my life miserable. A few of my neighbors started giving me weird looks. I caught whispers when I walked by, and at the supermarket, an older woman patted my arm and said, "You know, dear, it might be best if you found somewhere else to live." It was clear Karen was spreading lies about me, and to top it all off, she scheduled an official HOA disciplinary meeting, like this was some kind of courtroom drama. I wasn't about to skip it. If Karen wanted a show, I'd give her one. The meeting was held in the community center, with Karen sitting at the front like some kind of judge. The rest of the HOA board sat beside her, and a bunch of residents had gathered to watch. Karen cleared her throat dramatically. "We are here today to discuss the repeated offenses of one disruptive homeowner." She listed off a bunch of nonsense, refusing to follow HOA rules, being aggressive, interfering with official HOA operations. Then she leaned forward, smiling like she'd already won. "We are considering further action, including fines and removal from the community." I waited until she finished, then stood up. "You don't have the power to do any of this." Karen's smile twitched. "The HOA has the right to enforce community standards." "No, the HOA has the right to regulate common areas. You don't own my house. You can't evict me. You can't fine me. And you sure as hell can't call fake disciplinary meetings just because you don't like me." A few neighbors started whispering. Karen's confidence wavered. I kept going. "Oh, and let's talk about the fake police stunt, the trash can mysteriously disappearing. The nonsense about a plumbing emergency that didn't exist. This isn't about rules. This is about Karen throwing a tantrum because she didn't get her way." Now the whispering turned into full-on murmurs. A few people looked downright embarrassed to be there. Karen's face was practically purple. "That is completely untrue." I folded my arms. Then explain how calling real cops on me worked out for you. Silence. Karen clenched her jaw, but had nothing to say. The HOA board members glanced at each other, clearly realizing they'd backed the wrong horse. One of the older neighbors in the audience spoke up. Wait, so the HOA can't actually enforce any of this? I shook my head. Nope, a few more neighbors started speaking up. Then why are we even here? One muttered. This is ridiculous, another said. Karen shot to her feet. The HOA exists to maintain order in this community. But it was too late. People were already standing up, shaking their heads, walking out. The meeting was over. And Karen had lost. About a week later, just when I thought Karen might finally be done, I saw two official-looking vehicles pull up in front of my house. County inspectors. I didn't even have to guess who was behind this. Sure enough, across the street, Karen was standing on her porch, arms crossed, smiling like she had just won the lottery. One of the inspectors approached me with a clipboard. Sir, we received a complaint about multiple code violations on your property. We need to conduct an inspection. I raised an eyebrow. Violations? Like what? He flipped through his papers. Unauthorized structures, illegal plumbing modifications, possible pest infestations? I actually laughed. You're joking, he sighed. We have to check. I wasn't worried. I had nothing to hide, so I let them do their inspection while Karen watched like a hawk, probably expecting them to find some major issue that would have me kicked out. They checked everything, my garage, my plumbing, even looked around for these so-called pests. After about an hour, one of the inspectors came back, shaking his head. There's nothing wrong here. I turned and looked directly at Karen. Her smug smile was gone. The inspector continued, We'll be documenting this as a false complaint. Karen's face turned bright red. That was the last straw. I went straight to the county office and filed a harassment complaint against the HOA. And that's when everything really blew up. The authorities started looking into the HOA's history. Specifically, the endless fines, ridiculous rule enforcement, and Karen's involvement. What they found was even better than I could have hoped for. Turned out, Karen wasn't just drunk on power. She was also stealing from the HOA's funds. Over $30,000 was missing. The HOA board, which had backed her up all this time, suddenly wanted nothing to do with her. They threw her under the bus instantly, claiming they had no idea what she had been doing. Karen tried to fight back, but it was useless. She was officially removed from her position. And just when she thought things couldn't get worse, the police arrived. For real this time, watching Karen get put in actual handcuffs, real ones, not the plastic dollar store version, was the most satisfying thing I had ever seen. As the officers led her to the squad car, someone in the growing crowd yelled, "Well done, Karen! I swear, I've never seen someone look so furious and humiliated at the same time." After that, things changed fast. The HOA was completely restructured. They tossed out the ridiculous rules, got rid of the absurd fines, and actually started doing what an HOA is supposed to do, taking care of the neighborhood, not terrorizing it. Karen tried to fight the charges, but she lost. She ended up having to sell her house and leave town. And just like that, peace was restored. Now, every once in a while, I think about her and wonder where she ended up. But one thing's for sure, wherever she is, she's probably still trying to run a neighborhood like her own personal kingdom. At least this time, it's not mine. HOAs can be great when they actually do their job, keeping the neighborhood nice, handling common areas, and making sure nobody paints their house neon green. But when power-hungry people like Karen take over, it turns into a full-blown disaster. I got lucky. I had the badge, the law, and a whole lot of patience on my side. But I know not everyone is in that position. So, have you ever had to deal with a nightmare HOA? Have you faced ridiculous fines, crazy rules, or a Karen who thought she was the queen of the cul-de-sac? Drop your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. And if you enjoyed this roller coaster of entitlement and karma, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. There are plenty more wild HOA and entitled people stories coming your way. After all, as long as there are Karens in the world, there will always be stories to tell.